All right, what's good with it there, fellas? What you just watched prior to this was a big old bench press PR by one of my clients, Justin. I've worked with Justin forever. The dude is a goddamn workhorse, and to see his work pay off with a big old 25-pound PR. The 25 pounds, maybe a little bit misleading. He's been good for above his old bat max of about 400 for a little bit now. We really nailed it, and we expressed it this training cycle. But really, really happy with that. Really proud of him. The dude's a workhorse. He just shuts up and works, like probably to his detriment, and I have to be the one to rein him in, and that's a lot of my job. But I wanted to give you guys just a quick spark notes on what led us to kind of overcoming that plateau he was facing in the 400-pound range. So I've boiled down Justin's kind of big success recently to 3 major categories that I thought maybe you guys would think is interesting. Now, this doesn't have to be around the 400-pound range. These might be the changes you need to make to get past the 200, the 300, or maybe the 500-pound range. Who knows, right? So the first one that's pretty common is Justin has always excelled in the squat and the deadlift. While those often require antagonistic builds, you will see a kind of certain type of athlete that really excels at those in particular early in their training. And usually it's not as much due to their leverages, it's due to the components of training that they really enjoy. They really like going heavy. Maybe they really have kind of learned to appreciate how much technique can do for them, and they like specific powerlifting training. My brother actually could fall into this category in his first 5 years of lifting, where his squat and his deadlift got better and better and better, and he was hitting these cool numbers that people were like, oh my God, I can't believe a 15-year-old is lifting that. Nobody ever said that about his bench, right? And a lot of that was because he really liked lifting heavy. He loved that kind of like warming up, going hard, like moving the weights fast, going heavy. He didn't really learn to like bodybuilding training. It was just kind of something you mindlessly did afterward. It wasn't something he was passionate about, and it wasn't something he was getting the most out of. So his overall upper body muscularity kind of lagged behind in his development. To some degree, that's kind of what happened with Justin as well. And so kind of having him really have a little bit more flexibility within his own program, where I'll say, hey, here's what I want you doing on your main compounds for today. And then I would like you to just exhaust this list of relevant musculature. Having him kind of come up with his own workouts and really kind of fall in love with that process of the hypertrophy side of training has really gotten the ball moving. And that was the same thing that Max needed to do. So that was number 1. Now, the second thing we had to do with Justin, very similar to the first, kind of ties back to that, hey, we really need to fall in love with other aspects of training and put on more upper body muscularity. But the second thing we had to look at, which is really common, is that Justin's bench press got very efficient very early in his training career. He got a relatively big arch early on, which some people can just do that right away and some can't. He took a wider grip relatively early on, and he got quite efficient with his movement. His scapular control was good. All of these other more kind of abstract things, all of these things kind of combined together to make his bench press a very, very effective way to display strength, but it got so efficient that it became a much less potent stimulus in terms of developing strength or developing hypertrophy. So what we needed to do was we needed to include an exercise regularly in our rotation, and very regularly place a high priority on it a lot of the year that takes away some of those mechanical advantages that he leverages on his main technique. So in Justin's case, we just made his secondary bench pressing day a close grip day. Some people would say, well, let's do close grip feet up and also reduce the arch. Justin's a relatively advanced athlete, so we really only wanted to get one deviation away from what we actually want to get better at. So we could have done a Larson, or we could have done a feet up rather than combining the both. So we elected to do a close grip. That way he could still practice kind of his leg drive mechanics, still kind of get comfortable with the arch, build strength in that same plane of pressing. Whereas the Larson could potentially, with someone with that big of an arch, change the plane of the press, which isn't a problem, but that was why we chose that to be our way of adding some extra range of motion. Close grip, we're taking that elbow joint through a greater range of motion and also taking the shoulder through a greater range of motion. And what we did is we just made his secondary bench pressing day the whole training cycle. It was just close grip. Even in the peaking phase, where on paper it might make sense to rotate that secondary day to be more comp bench, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get as efficient as possible. We want to really hone our technique and practice it often. We're not trying to get bigger. We're not trying to get stronger necessarily. We're trying to get as neurally efficient and technically efficient as possible. So on paper, you'd say, well, let's rotate that close grip day to another comp day for the final 3 weeks. But things were going so well, it was very much well, it's not broke. don't fix it scenario. So we actually left his secondary day close grip all the way up through his peaking phase, and that led to very good performance. So we're going to plan on doing that again and again and again until we feel the need to make adjustment. Maybe that's something we mess with down the line, but that was one of the other things that led to Justin's success this training cycle. And then the third and final thing that we did with Justin's training to kind of lead to this recent wave of progress was actually lowering his frequency. As I mentioned at the beginning, Justin's a bit of a workhorse. The guy can handle absurd amounts of work on the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. And in the past, that's kind of what we've been leveraging to get better. But in our efforts to get bigger, put on more upper body musculature, we kind of took more of the Dorian approach, which is, hey, we're really going to bury ourselves a little bit less often and give a longer duration to recover and grow potentially. So Justin was one of the rare cases in coaching that I've seen where someone who can recover from 3x frequency would actually be better off with 2, where he was recovering just fine, but if we take that same volume, we condense it into 2 more difficult sessions, but have a longer duration in between them. He seemed to respond to that a lot better, and he seems to be growing a lot better from that. I will say that I've seen that a couple other athletes, sometimes guys who have very stressful jobs, sometimes guys who have maybe not the best outside the gym variables, their diet's a little their sleep is a little maybe they're a university student and they're still kind of getting these things together. Sometimes I'll notice that, hey, if we just make it 2 higher priority sessions, they respond better to 2 really quality sessions than 3 kind of sessions. So I've seen that, but Justin was on the ball with his outside the gym variables, and he was handling the 3x quite well. So that was a bit more interesting and something that he seemed to be responding to a bit uniquely. Some of my really strong athletes, I've seen that same thing where instead of having deadlifts on, let's say, Tuesdays and RDLs after their squats on Fridays, something like that, some of my strongest guys, they respond better to taking those and stacking those into 1 brutal day of hinging and then getting 7 days in between. Just a better response. Who knows why that is? But I will say, on average, if you guys are trying to extrapolate from this and learn from this, I will say most people on average respond better to splitting things across more sessions because it leads to each individual set being higher quality. So that's kind of the average I observed, although you might fall into the same camp as Justin. So I kind of wanted to put that out there because right now you'll hear people beat that drum of frequency, but sometimes longer durations, like burying yourself just a little bit more and then sending a little bit longer to recover, sometimes that elicits a better growth response, which is exactly what Justin needed. His technique skill was very high. We could get away with a lower frequency. What we needed was really a more robust hypertrophic adaptation. And then I want to make sure I answer one of you guys' questions. I was sitting around and I was thinking, okay, what do I want to do for my videos on the days where I'm not doing a big bench press session for the road to 600, when I'm not doing a big deadlift session on my maybe road to 880 that'll start sooner or later, not doing a big squat session. I don't have some of my own lifting to show off. I really like these like mixed media videos where I show a lift, I do some talking, and then I would always answer a question, right? I was talking to Paris, the grand wizard of video titles and whatnot, and I kind of came up with a couple ideas for what I wanted to do with these general videos on the days that I'm not training. The first is I was like, well, I don't need to only show my lifts. I could also show the lifts of the guys I coach. I've got great athletes that are busting their asses, and I always think they deserve more credit, and they deserve people seeing the extraordinary effort some of them are putting towards getting stronger. And I was like, well, I've got a YouTube. I could just put them. And it made me really happy to think that like maybe some of the regulars on my channel, you guys know who you are, the comment section guys. I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if like the guys that follow my channel had like favorites among the athletes that I coach. Because I think a lot of them just have no big social media following, and people don't realize like how much like a studs these dudes are. So I was like, oh, it'd be cool if like they had like some fans. I don't know. So I'll start including some of their lifts at the beginning, talking about maybe some of what we do to get them stronger and what unique approaches we take for that athlete, because that's fun. And then the other thing I wanted to do is, while I've been trying to jack up the entertainment value, it's important to me that this channel stays helpful in trying to get you guys stronger. I like to feel that my channel existing has numerical impacts on people's progress in the gym. So I figured one thing we could do, I might even start answering a question at the end of my road to 600 videos, because why not, right? Because there's always a surplus of questions. I get questions on my Patreon that I try to get back to everybody within 48 hours. So if you got hyper specific questions about your own stuff and you want to consult me, it's $5. I'll get back to you, give you my thoughts. I try to help out everybody on there. Little plug, but I also could answer maybe one per video. So the one we're doing today, I'll put down here. I thought it was a nice, simple, good question that I've got a decent answer for. So it is, how important how important is it to stick to specific single joint movements in cycle? Could I just switch and equate volume? So he's saying that, like, hey, let's say we're doing triceps at the end of our bench press workout. How important is it that we stick with the same full range of motion single joint exercise? Can I rotate from tricep rope press downs over to skull crushers? Can I rotate my skull crushers to overhead extensions if I really burn out on them? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is I kind of break things into 3 tiers of exercises. We have our number 1 tier, and this isn't the tiers that people use for building programs. It's more just how I think about whether things are rotatable. The first tier is the thing that we want to get better at, whether that is the events in your upcoming contest is for strongman, whether that is the power lifts, whether that's weightlifting, whether that is street lifting disciplines, right? Or whether it's just the stuff we've decided, hey, you know what sounds too cool to me? If I could just be a guy with a monster weighted pull-up and like a monster deadlift, that's what I want to be. Okay, well, those are your main things. Those things we're probably not going to rotate. We're probably not going to have too much variation in them, maybe a little bit, but we don't want to get too far away from what we actually want to get better at. We can't really have as much flexibility with those. The way we avoid the repeated bouts effect and keep our stimulus novel is through rotating our intensities, frequencies, and volumes, right? Then you kind of have a second tier, which is exercises that are non-competitive, but we notice whether they're in the program or not when we're doing our competitive style exercises, right? So maybe a close grip bench press for Justin, it's not something he competes in, but we notice very quickly in his terms of his progression whether that's in there. For myself, something like a Yukon bar bench press or a dumbbell bench press might fall into this category where, yes, it's not something I compete in, but I do notice whether it's there or not. And it makes a noticeable difference in terms of position-specific strength or technique, or maybe if I'm in the bottom of my squat and I haven't been doing my belt squats, I know I haven't been doing them. So that's, again, something we have a little bit less flexibility. Maybe we could rotate those once a training cycle to a couple of things that we think do a similar idea. Now we get down to the bottom tier, which is things that don't have any skill carryover. We don't really notice any differences in position-specific strength when we're doing them. We're doing them as a long-term investment for the hypertrophy of our primary movers, yeah, blah, blah, blah. You know my shit. Those ones, they're relatively simple. As long as we're taking a joint through a full range of motion against load and overloading them with time, we're getting the benefit, and that means we also have a lot of flexibility when we rotate them. On one hand, I do think some people rotate exercises too often, where when we add in a new exercise, we're going to get better at it fast. Right? We're going to be adding, we're going to be matching or maybe even beating our reps and adding weight every week. And some of that is going to be hypertrophy response because it's a novel stimulus, but a lot of that's going to be neural adaptation and your body just getting better at this new movement. And in my opinion, I like riding it past that point where those neural gains kind of taper off. And we're not just adding weight every session. We're just doing one more rep. It's hard. One more rep. It's hard. One more rep. It's hard. Then we add some weight. Those reps drop back. And it's a difficult chip, 1 to 2 reps each week. Right? And that's where we're kind of working more pure contractile tissue gains, and we ride that out for a while. So in my opinion, yeah, you can rotate it too quickly. If you rotate every time you run into that slowed progress, in my opinion, you're missing out a little bit, right? But on the other hand, if you're just no longer getting a pump from an exercise, if you are just like, man, I hate this exercise, it's ruining this workout, goddamn, just do a different tricep exercise. It doesn't matter that much. So it's like, yeah, you can definitely rotate those. If you're going to rotate the mid-training cycle, I would just tell you, hey, I recommend taking it a little easier that first week because it is a novel stimulus. You might catch yourself off guard with this new movement and be a little bit more sore than you expected, and it could throw off your next bench day. So if you are going to rotate mid-training cycle, the one piece of advice I have for you is take that first session a little easy. It's a novel stimulus. Just doing a bit will probably be enough to get you better, and then push back into your standard equated effort sets, blah, 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 4 sets after bench press, whatever it is, full range of motion for the elbow, boom, pow, cool. That is all.